In today's video, we're gonna be starting with an absolutely empty Godot project, and by typing some letters into our computer, we're going to end up with an amazing looking grid inventory with stacking. If that sounds interesting, let us begin. So let's start by creating a main scene. In here, let's call it main. Let's save it in our scenes. Then we're gonna create another scene that is going to be a panel container, and this is going to be called inventory, which is going to be our inventory. Let's save it in our scenes. Then let's add a script to our inventory, and we're gonna call it inventory, and let's save it in our scripts folder. And in here we're going to delete all of this, and the first thing we're going to add is going to be an export variable that is going to be called items, and it is going to be an array of some kind. Then we're going to need another variable that is going to be inventory size, that is going to be an integer, and in my case it is going to be 24. Now in our ready function we're gonna call a init inventory function that we are going to create right now. It is going to be void, and in this function we're going to create empty slots for our items array. We're going to resize it to our inventory size minus our items array size in case we have anything in it before we start the game. Then we're going to fill our empty slots with null, and then we're going to append our empty slots to our items array. And speaking of items, let's create a new folder that is going to be called resources, and inside of this one let's create a new script that is going to be item data.gd, and it is going to inherit from resource. Okay, and let's click create. Let's say class name item data in here, and what it is going to have, it is going to have export var item name, that is going to be a string, export var texture, that is going to be texture 2D, and then we're going to have a variable that is going to be called uid, that is going to be a string, and here we're going to have a getter function that is going to have a result variable that we're going to return, which is going to be our item name, that is going to be lowercase with all of the spaces replaced with underscores, and return result. And what it is going to do, basically it is going to transform our item name, which for example could be Godot icon, to Godot icon, which is going to come in handy later. This is very important, okay? Now we can go right click on our item data script and create a resource out of it. It is going to be called item data. Let's save, and in our inventory script let's explicitly say that our array takes in item data, and in here as well. Now let's go into our main scene and let's add our inventory scene to our main scene, and in here let's add a new item data into our items array, and let's give it a name of Godot icon, and the texture is going to be our mini icon. Now in here in our inventory script, after we init inventory, let's print our items and see if everything works. Let's run this thing, and as you can see we're printing our Godot icon resource and 23 nulls, which means it is working. Let's continue, and we're gonna continue by creating another scene, and it is going to be texture rect one, and it is going to be called inventory slot. Very nice, let's save it in our scene folder. Now let's switch to 2D and let's add some things to it, which is going to be another texture rect, which we're gonna call item display rect, and we're gonna give it a unique name. Now let's add a script to our inventory slot. It is going to be called inventory slot, and it is going to be in our scripts folder, and in here we're gonna delete all of this nonsense, and we're gonna add our nonsense, which is going to be an ready variable that is going to be the reference to our item display rect, just like so. Then we're gonna add two new variables that are going to be var slot item data, which is going to be our item dating. By default it is going to be null, and then we're gonna have another variable that is going to be an index, and by default it is going to be -1. Now let's create a function that is going to be called a display item function, that is going to be taking in item data of item data type, and it is going to be setting our slot item data to item data, and it is going to be updating our item display rect texture to our slot item data, texture, just like so. And then we're gonna go into our assets UI folder and grab our inventory slot and put it on our texture of our inventory slot. Now in here in layout drop down, let's change our custom minimum size to 24 by 24. Now let's create an item grid, and to do that we're gonna need to create a new scene that is going to be a grid container, and it is going to be called item grid. No, not item grod, item grid. Here we go. Now let's create a script on our item grid. Let's put it into scripts. Let's delete all of this and let's create a function that is going to be called display items. It is going to take in an items array of item data, and in here we're going to loop over our items array just like so, and for each inventory slot that is our child of index I, we're going to set inventory slot index to I, and if our item in our items array is not null, we're going to call inventory slot display item with our item. Now let's go into our inventory scene and let's add our item grid scene to it. Let's increase the amount of columns to, let's say, 6. And then let's add our inventory slot to our item grid, and let's press Ctrl D 23 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Here we go. And then let's give our item grid a unique name, and in our inventory script, let's get the access to our item grid on ready var item grid, just like so. And after we init inventory, let's call item grid display items with our items. Let's hope that it works. And here we are. Amazing. Yeah. And to fix that, we're gonna go into our inventory slot scene, and on our item display rect, we're gonna go into our layout and transform and click in here on our reset size thingamajig, and ta-da! We have fixed it. It is ultra mega small, so let's do something with that now. So let's go ahead into our project settings, and in our window thing in here, let's set viewport width to 1920 divided by 4 and 1080 divided by 4, and in our window width override, let's say 1920 divided by 2 and 1080 divided by 2. And then in our stretch mode, we're gonna set our mode to canvas items, and scale mode is going to be integer. And let's run this thing again, and here we go. Look at this, it is much bigger. And to fix the blurriness, let's go back into project settings and just type in filter, and let's change this default texture filter to nearest, and in here use nearest mip-map filter, click onto on. And now when we start it again, it is going to look amazing. Now let's make it so we can click on the item, drag it and put it somewhere else. And to do that, we're gonna need to create another scene that is going to be another texture rect. Here we go. And this scene is going to be called Draggable item. Let's save it in our scenes and let's add a new script to it. Let's put it in our scripts folder, and in here we're going to create a variable that is going to be called item data of the type item data that is going to be null by default. And in our ready function, we're going to call display item function that is going to take an item data that we're going to create right now. Display item data, and in here we're going to check if our new item data is not null. We're gonna set our item data to our new item data, and then we're going to set our texture to our item data dot texture. And for now, that's gonna be it. Now here, let's create a process function just like so, and say our self global position is going to be equal get global mouse position minus get rect dot size divided by 2. And what it is going to do, it is basically going to make it so our draggable item is following our mouse. And the last thing for now, in here in our draggable item, we're gonna go into our groups tab, and we're going to add a draggable item into a group that is going to be called draggable item. Now, in our inventory slots, we need to do a couple of things. The first thing we're gonna do is we need to click on our item display rect and make it so it ignores the mouse input. So let's click on ignore in here in mouse. And then in our inventory slot, we're going to create an export variable that is going to be called draggable item scene. It is going to be of a type of a packed scene. That is going to be our draggable scene. So let's actually draggable item, let's put it in. Here we go. Then we're going to create a ready function in which we're going to connect to a GUI input signal. And we're going to connect it to our on GUI input function that we're going to create right now in here on GUI input. And the parameters of this function is just an input event, like so. Now, if our event is input event mouse button, we're gonna get the reference to our held item by simply saying get tree, get first node in group, and the name of the group of our draggable item, which is by coincidence, is going to be draggable item. And if event button index is going to be mouse button left and event is pressed, which means we're left clicking, we're going to check if no slot item data, which means slot is empty. For now, we're just going to return. Else, if we don't have any held item in our hands, we're going to pick item, slot item data. And this pick item function we're going to create right now. Pick item, item data, item data. And the first thing we're gonna do here, we're going to make item draggable item data, which is going to be another function that we're going to create right now. Make item draggable. Here we go. And here we're going to create our draggable item by saying draggable item scene.instantiate, then setting the item data of our draggable item to item data that we have in here. And then we need to say get tree root add child draggable item to add our draggable item to our thing. And then we need to remember to update our item display rect texture with nothing, as well as our slot item data with nothing. Now let's run this thing and see how it goes. And here we go. Look at this. We're holding it in our hands. Now let's make it so we can place the item back. Let's delete this return in here and let's check if we have a held item in our hands. If we do, we're gonna call a function place item with this held item as a parameter. And let's create this place item function in here, and our held item is a node. So let's say display item, held item, item data, and held item view free. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, should be it. Let's try this out. So we're picking it up and we are not able to place it down. And the reason for that is because our held item is blocking our input. So let's go into our draggable item scene, and where we have our mouse thingamajig, let's set it to ignore. And actually, while we're at it, let's go into layout, into transform, and let's reset our size to 0. So now let's run this thing again. Let's pick this up and let's place it down. Here we go. Look at this. Look how amazing. Look how nice it works. Very good. But now, if we're gonna take a look at our inventory and take a look at our items array in our remote view, we're gonna see that this item is still in slot with an index 0, which means visuals are not representing the data. So let's go ahead and fix that. And to fix that, we're gonna need to go back into our inventory slot script, and in here at the top, let's create 2 signals. Signal 1 is going to be called item taken, and it is going to have a parameter of index int, and the second signal is going to be called item placed. It is going to have as a parameter item data of item data type and also an index. Now at the bottom in here where we have our place item function, we're gonna say item placed emit held item item data, and then we're gonna say index. And also in here in our pick item thing, we're gonna say item taken emit index. Now let's go into our item grid, and in here let's create 2 very similar signals. So first one, signal item taken, is going to take index int, and the second one, signal item placed, item data index int. Now in here, where we're displaying the items, we're gonna say the following: inventory slot item taken connect index int, and then we're gonna simply re-emit our own version of this signal, just like so. Then let's do the same with item taken. Oh, item placed, I mean. Here we go. Now let's go into our inventory script and connect to these signals. So let's go to our inventory script and on the ready function, let's say item grid item taken connect on item taken, and let's create this function in here on item taken, and it is taken in index as far as I remember. And what it is going to do, it is basically going to say items index equals no. Very simple. And then item grid item placed connect on item placed. Let's make this function as well. Func on item placed. It is taken in item data, and index int, and it is doing kind of the exact same thing. So items index equals item data, just like so. Now let's run this thing and take a look. Let's grab this guy and place it somewhere else. Let's go into our remote view and click on our inventory and on our array, and as we can see, it is in 7th slot. Very good and amazing. Now let's add more items to our items array and see what's gonna happen. So in our main scene, let's click on inventory, and in its items, let's add another item data. And this time it is going to be called green apple. And let's add a texture of a green apple to this thing. Then let's add maybe another thing that is going to be called health potion. It is going to have a texture of a potion. And I guess we're good for now. Let's run this thing and see what's gonna happen. And here we go. Look at this. It actually all works pretty nicely. What happens when we click with an item on the another item? Nothing. So let's go ahead and fix that. So in our inventory slot script, let's go in here where we are checking whether we have held item in our hands. And if we do, if our slot item data UID is not equal to held item data UID, which means they are different, we're going to call a function swap items. It is going to take in held item and slot item data. After that, we're going to return. Now let's create the swap items function somewhere in here. Func swap items, held item node and item data. And what we're gonna do here is we're going to create temporary copy of our item data that we're trying to swap with, duplicate. Then we're going to emit our item taken with our index. Then we're going to display item, held item data. Then we're going to emit item placed, held item data and our index. Then we're gonna set our held item data to our temp, and we're gonna call held item display item with our temp as well. And honestly, that should be it. Let's run this thing and see what's gonna happen. Look at this. Works. First try. Just like that. Amazing. Very cool. Now, if you've made this far into the video, congratulations. You have an above average attention span. Please like and subscribe. Now let's add quantity and stacking to our items. To do that, we're going to go into our item data script and add two new variables. The first one is going to be export var quantity. It is going to be an int. It is going to be 1. And the other one is going to be max stack size. It is also going to be an integer, and I would like it to be 64. Now let's go to our inventory slot scene and let's add to our item display rect a new thing that is going to be a label. And let's call this label quantity. Let's give it a unique name, and in the script of the inventory slot at the top, let's add a new unready variable that is going to be var quantity label, just like so. And then at the bottom, we're going to add a new function that is going to be called func update quantity label. It is going to be void, and in here we're going to check if slot item data quantity is bigger than 1. We're gonna say quantity label text is going to be equal to string slot item data quantity label show, else quantity label hide. Now we're gonna go ahead and call this function inside of our display item function somewhere in here. Update quantity label. Now if we will go into our main scene, click on an inventory, and in here where we have our items, we'll change the quantity of our Godot icon to something like 12 and run this thing. We're gonna see a huge 12 being displayed on the slot. Amazing. Now, to fix the number label being so huge, let's go into our project settings and type in font, and in the theme thingamajig, we're gonna click on this custom font thing and select our font in here. We're gonna save and restart. Then in our inventory slot scene, let's go into 2D view and let's click on item display rect, and here let's say that it's full rect, and then on quantity label let's say that it is bottom right. Okay, then in here we're going to put in some placeholder values such as 64, and then let's resize it like this. Now let's change horizontal alignment of our label to right, and then in our theme overrides and font sizes, let's set the font size to 8. Now we'll need to do this, but other than that it is kind of working. Let's run this thing and see how it looks. Very nice. Let's continue. Let's hide this quantity label so it's not visible by default, and let's go into our inventory slot script in here, and let's call update quantity label when we place item down, and in here when we are picking item up, we're gonna say quantity label dot hide. Now let's go into our draggable item scene and let's create another label that is going to be also called quantity. We're gonna give it a unique name, and let's get an access to it from here on ready var label, just like so, and let's create a very similar function, update quantity label, and it is going to be actually exactly the same. So if quantity is bigger than 1, we're going to say quantity label show, and then quantity label text is going to be equal to string item data quantity, and else quantity label hide. Now we're going to call this function in our display item, so update quantity label like so, and if we run this thing we should see this happening. Very good. Now the only thing that is left is to position this thing properly, which is going to be done in a very easy fashion. Let's make the minimum size of our draggable item 24 and 24, and then our quantity label is going to have a default value of 64, and then let's change the font size, this guy, to 8, the horizontal alignment to right, and let's make it bottom right in here, and do stuff like so. And here we are. Let's run this thing again, and ta-da! It is functioning. Amazing. Now let's do the stacking. Back in our inventory script, let's create another function here at the bottom that is going to be called stack. And it is going to take in quantity of int, and what it's going to do, it is basically going to say slot item data quantity plus equals q, and then we're going to say update quantity label, and finally item placed emit slot item data index. Now let's go into our own GUI function and use it. So in here, right after we swap items, in case if our items are the same type, we'll need to figure out a couple of things. So first of all, we need to figure out our quantity sum of the held item in our slot item data. Slot item data quantity plus held item data quantity. So if our quantity sum is bigger than our slot item data max stack size, which means it will not fit in one slot, and if our slot item data quantity is less than slot item data max stack size, which means there's still some free space left, we're going to figure out this free space, which is going to be called difference of slot item data max stack size minus slot item data quantity. Then we're simply going to stack this difference. Then we need to update our held item information, so held item data quantity minus equals difference, and then held item update quantity label. Else, if our quantity sum is less than max stack size or equal to it, we're just going to say stack held item data quantity, and then just simply held item q3. So now let's go into our main scene, click on our inventory, and let's add another item data into our inventory. Let's name it something similar that we already have, such as Godot icon. Let's add a mini icon as a texture for it. Let's change its quantity to something like 32, and let's make it unique. Okay, let's run this thing and see what's gonna happen. So we should be able to stack these two things together. Look at this, 44. Very nice. It seems to work. Very good. Now let's go ahead and handle splitting the stack and also placing one item at a time. Now back in our inventory slot script, somewhere in here at the bottom, let's make a function that is going to be called place1. And it is going to take in held item node as a parameter. And the first thing it's going to do is going to take held item data quantity, and it is going to reduce it by 1. Then we're going to update held item label, update quantity label, and then we will need to place this one item in our slot, and to do that we will need to make a copy of our held item data data duplicate. We're going to increase its quantity, held item data quantity equals 1, and we're going to display item held item data, and then we're going to emit item placed, emit held item data, and our index. Now if it is the last item that we're trying to place from our held item data quantity, we're going to just say held item q3. Now let's go back into our GUI input function, and in here we need to check if our event button index is going to be equal to mouse button right and event is pressed. We're gonna see if we have held item in our hands, and if we don't have anything in our slot item data, we're going to place one of our held item. Now let's run this thing and see if it works. And here we go, look at this, amazing, very good. And we can even stack it back if we wanted to. But let's move on. In here, if we do have something in our slot, let's say if our slot item data UID is not equal to held item data UID, which means the items are different, we're going to swap items, held item and slot item data, and then we're going to return. Otherwise, we're going to do kind of the same thing as we did with the stacking. So let's figure out our quantity sum. That is going to be slot item data quantity plus 1, and if our quantity sum is bigger than our slot item data max stack size, we're going to do nothing. Otherwise, we're going to stack 1, and then we're going to update our held item data quantity by minus equals 1, and also we will need to update our held item quantity label as well. And also we need to say that if we don't have anything in our held item anymore, item data quantity, we need to say held item q3. Let's run, let's take a look. And oh, okay, well, it seems that I made a mistake, and I know precisely where it is. Look at this. I did a double negative in here, so let's delete this first exclamation mark and try again. And let's see. And look at this. Amazing. Very good and very nice. Now let's split the stack. Back in our inventory grid script, let's create a function that is going to be called split, and here we're going to do the following. We're going to create a duplicate of our slot item data, so slot item data duplicate. Then we're going to divide the quantity of our duplicate by 2. Then we're gonna say that our slot item data quantity minus equals draggable item data quantity. Then we need to create our draggable item scene, which we're going to do by draggable item scene instantiate. Draggable item data is going to be our draggable item data, and we're just going to say get tree, root, and child draggable item. Then after that, we're going to update our own quantity label, and we're gonna emit item placed, emit with our slot item data and our index. And in here in our GUI function, if we do not have our held item, so else, we're going to check if we don't have slot item data or our slot item data quantity is equal to 1, we're going to do nothing. Otherwise, we're going to split. Now let's run this thing and see what's gonna happen. Let's grab this one and look at this. it works precisely as intended. Amazing. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to figure out how to add items to the inventory programmatically. So in our item grid script, let's create a new function that is going to be called update slot with data. And it is going to take in item data, and index. And it is going to be a pretty easy function. It is basically going to do get child of index and then call display item on that slot, item data. Now in our inventory script, here's where the craziness begins. So this is probably going to be the most confusing part of this entire video. So let's make a function that is going to be called add item. It is going to take in item data. Now, since we have stacking, it is going to be kind of crazy complicated to add new items to inventory, especially if we have items of the same type. So we need to top up the item stacks if we have items that are not at the full capacity, and we need to fill other kind of empty slots with the rest. So let's start by creating a variable that is going to be called current item quantity. It is going to be of item data quantity. Then we're going to loop over our items array, so item size, and if we don't have item in that slot, we're going to continue. Otherwise, if items at I index UID is equal to item data UID, we're going to say we're going to figure out our top up amount, which is going to be calculated by figuring out the minimum between current item quantity and items max stack size minus items quantity. I know. And then we will increase this item amount, this item's quantity, by this top up amount. And we will need to decrease the current item quantity by this top up amount. And we're not done yet, because next we're going to loop for I in our items size, and if we do have an item in there, we're going to continue. Then if our current item quantity is less or equal to 0, we're going to break. Otherwise, we're going to create a new item data duplicate, and if our current item quantity is less of item data max stack size, we're going to be saying new item data quantity is going to be equal to current item quantity. Then we're going to say that our items at index I is going to be our new item data, and then our current item quantity is going to be 0, and then we're going to break. In here, in case our current item quantity is bigger than max stack size, we're going to say new item data quantity is going to be equal to new item data max stack size, and current item quantity minus equal to new item data max stack size, and then we're going to set our item I to our new item data. And finally, we're going to loop over our array again, and this time, if we do have items in there, we're going to say item grid update slot with data, items and I. Now to check if it works, we need to go into our ready function in here and create an item in here. So var new item is going to be item data new item name is going to be, I don't know, let's say red apple. New item quantity is going to be 32. New item max stack size is going to be, well, to check if it works, let's do 12. Okay, and new item texture is going to be load. Oh, this actually kind of works nicely. This. And now we can say add item, new item. Now let's run this thing, and here we go. Look at this. Everything is separated in 2 stacks of 12, and then we have 8 left over that we cannot put on top of this apple. Very good. We can do all sorts of operations on it. Amazing. And I would say that we're done here, but I want to improve it a little bit more. So in our inventory scene in 2D view, let's go into our theme override styles and click on this panel thingamajig, and let's create a new one that is going to be style box texture. And for the texture, let's put in inventory inventory background texture. Now, in here, in sub-region, let's open up this guy and let's figure out what we're gonna do with this. So let's grab these stripy lines in here and drag them somehow like so on each corner, like this, and then like this. And that should be good. Now, on our item grid, in our theme overriding constants, let's change separation to 1. And just like so, it is already looking amazing. Let's go into our main scene and click on the inventory and make sure it is in the center. Now when we run the game, we can see how amazing it looks. But I'm afraid it's gonna be it. So thank you everybody for watching. I hope it helped, and like and subscribe and stuff, and I'm gonna see you next time with something new. Bye.